Remember the first time you downloaded a song from your favorite artist? Well, digital pirating changed the music industry forever, and a new documentary explores the effects, good and bad. Today on the podcast, How Music Got Free. I'm Emil Niazi, sitting in for Elamine Abdel Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, I think it's been long enough that I can admit now that I have illegally downloaded music. Whether it was Napster or LimeWire, I used all of it. In fact, in high school, I got in trouble for putting a lot of songs onto the music computer in the library. But like I said, it's been a long time. A lot has changed since then. And now there's a new documentary out on Paramount Plus that explores how illegal downloading changed the music industry forever, but also birthed a digital music revolution. Take a listen.
When Napster first came about, I didn't understand the internet yet. I thought Yahoo was a person.
That's a great line from Eminem, and that's from the documentary How Music Got Free. To go a little deeper on this, Nico Stratus is here, Raleigh Pemberton is here. Hi, both.
Hi.
Hey, what's good?
So excited to have this conversation. It feels like part of this whole millennial nostalgia wave that's hitting us. Let's go back to when, our generation effectively ruined music forever.
Congratulations, us.
Yes, congratulations, us. Just want to do a little, throwback to the very first thing that you downloaded. Nico, let me start with you.
I feel like this is a sting operation where we're admitting all our sins, and then after we get off this call, someone's going to knock on the door.
Exactly.
I wish I could remember. I mean, I'm right in that perfect age. I'm in my early 40s. So I was right there when Napster was coming online. I was on dial-up internet in the Yukon where I grew up. I'm sure it was because I was a punk rock kid. So I'm sure it was a Rancid song, or it was a song that claimed it was the Legend of Zelda theme by System of a Down, which it absolutely was not. But it was a song labeled as that. I was like, okay, I'm going to leave this on for 5 hours. I'm going to go to most of school, and then I'm going to come home and I'm going to have one new song to listen to. And that was sort of how I lived my life.
Yeah, and you've broken your parents' computer, and now you're in big trouble.
Oh, yeah, it's fried forever.
And Raleigh, what about you?
Yeah, for me, it was actually a non-album Eminem track called Hellbound that
I love it.
It sampled a video game. That's why I really wanted to download it. It sampled Soul Calibur. Yeah.
Well, I love the video game connection between what both of you were searching for on Napster. Nico, did you feel bad doing it? This was back in the era before we really knew, most of us doing it were probably young and not as connected to the arts. I certainly didn't feel bad. Did you?
Not really, no. I mean, look, this isn't an era where I didn't feel bad about anything at all. But I didn't really understand that what I was doing was potentially harmful to artists' careers, because I wasn't really thinking of things in that term. It was just well, they're all rich and famous. I'm poor. So who cares? I very much had a who cares mentality about it. And I was still buying music, and I still felt like I was feeding into the system. So it was well, who's to blame, or who hurts if I steal just one, just a little song here,
Yeah. Raleigh, you're a fan. You talked about, downloading an Eminem song, but you're also an artist. And I'm curious to know, what it feels like to be on the other side of this.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. One of my albums actually was leaked back in the day. My second album, After Party Babies, it was leaked, and everyone freaked out. My labels were all freaking out. But I felt like it was actually kind of karmic. Because I was a hardcore pirate. Even all the programs I made my music were pirated, so I didn't feel that bad about it.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's good to know that you see it as karma. Nico, I mentioned kind of this millennial nostalgia thing that's happening. And, we know the effects now, but it's been many decades since this, sort of phenomenon first began. Why do you think they're telling this story now?
I think the context is almost starting to be washed away the further we get from the source, right? Like, because like we can look at sort of like Napster and LimeWire and SoulSeek and all these programs. Like we can look at that as like the genesis of all these things that were to come, that sort of like nascent era of the internet. But we're so far afield from that now that like you do almost get this idea, especially the younger generation, that music is sort of a commodity that is borderline free for them. And like not really understanding how we got here, I think puts that art in a precarious place, and like and artists, you know, fighting for better compensation and all of these things, all of these conversations that are very real and very like urgent right now. The context for those is kind of missing a little bit, so it's kind of important to put it in perspective and to go back and say, well, like, well, this is where we were and this is what happened, and now here we are. Like a lot of that conversation sort of needs to happen for a younger generation, so now more than ever it feels like very prescient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gen Z will never know what it's like to carry a bag full of CDs around. They'll never
we
know.
should force them to like give them like one stack of CDRs and be like, okay, carry this. Or like, you know, when you get a bag of flour and you're like, this is a kid, care for it. Everybody should have one stack of CDRs to have to carry everywhere they go, or a Case Logic CD wallet.
Raleigh, I love that you said that you were a pirate, because, you know, a lot of this documentary is told from the perspective of these sort of, you know, pirates at the forefront of this. Why do you think it was kind of important to hear their side of the story?
Yeah, I think it's really cool that they talk to the actual pirates, because I feel like it might eventually be forgotten by history, but these random individuals, usually just young teens,
Hmm.
brought the entire music industry to its knees. And it's a unique circumstance that I don't think would really be able to happen with today's streaming architecture and things. It feels like at this documentary, it wouldn't have been as good if it was just, you know, Eminem and Steve Stout and all these executives being like, well, that was a close one.
It's true. And, you know, you mentioned some of the changes that have taken place because of, you know, these pirates. You know, can we get into a little bit of some of those changes, some of the ways that this movement actually did affect the music industry?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the illegal downloading is what led to things like Apple Music and iTunes, where they saw that this was actually a pretty good idea. You know, people wanted faster distribution of music online. People wanted to be able to download whatever they wanted. So let's make it easy for them. And the industry did a really good job of reorienting the flow of the technology, because it was originally just pirates, nerds, like random school students, and
Hmm.
then they flipped it around, and now we have streaming companies like Spotify that are, you know, partly owned by the labels. So they found a way. There now the music industry is doing okay again.
Yes. Well, TBD, I guess. um, you know, we're talking about the documentary How Music Got Free. We are discussing the way that music piracy sort of revolutionized the music industry. Take a listen to this.
The music industry was flailing.
That's where we put on helmets, like we were at war.
One of the biggest exports America has, and it's going out of business.
So dramatic, so dramatic. But you know, I'm sure a lot of artists and I'm sure a lot of labels did feel like they were going to war. Nico, what do you think about that statement and the way industry execs were feeling at the time?
I mean, it's very much like, you know, capital is always going to sort of protect its own interests first and foremost, right? And like, in this idea of like, you know, America's biggest export and it's being destroyed, like, you know, there's this very real concern of like, oh, we were making a lot of money from this and suddenly now we're not. And it's, you know, a lot of when they talk to like Jimmy Iovine and people like that, it's like, you know, they're very worried about their bottom line, right? They're very worried about this, you know, cash flow that's coming in from this industry that has now been taken away by these pirates, you know, and so there's this they go to war. They're like, we've seen this time and again. Look, capitalism will always go to war to protect its own interests, and it very much happens here, right? Like they literally militarize themselves, and you know, they take the FBI and they're barging into people's houses because they've been downloading music, which is a wild sentence taken out of context, but is very much a thing that happened.
Oh,
and it is like. Yeah, it's just so baffling that it is like, going to war. And it's like, they really believed that. You know, you can imagine a boardroom where they're like, strap your helmets on, boys, we're going in.
Yeah, to Emil's bedroom to make sure she stops stealing the new Jewel CD.
How dare you?
Yeah. Wow, we're revealing a lot. A lot of intimate details are being shared today. Raleigh, was there also maybe a sense of liberation? Like the industry was also, very gate kept by a small group of people, and it did feel like something was being open, like, the floodgates were open and everyone was free to just take what they wanted. Is that, accurate?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it changed my life, the flow of music over the internet. I grew up in Edmonton, and I only had access to whatever was at HMV, whatever Incubus CD was out that week. I didn't really have the access to like all the underground rap music that I really wanted to listen to. And then suddenly, at like the snap of a finger, I had access to the entire recorded history of music. And I think that contributed to me becoming a musician. And I think we look at the way music is today, and I think we kind of take it for granted, the access that we have to more unique music. I think of an artist like Charlie XCX being as popular as she is now is because people have the context and know all this obscure music that they wouldn't have known maybe like 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So, Raleigh, going back to you as an artist, how do we ensure that artists are protected despite the fact that things have really sort of irrevocably changed?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we artists have a different problem now. It used to be, we were scared of our albums leaking, but now it's I'm kind of like, damn, I wish people wanted to download my music so bad that they would leak it and steal it. Now it's just hard to like get in front of people and get in the attention economy, actually have people listen to your record. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is with streaming, because it's a thorny issue for other reasons. But I do think we have to go back mentally to that spirit of downloading, and that era of just everyone was just feral and just obsessed with downloading as much music as they possibly could. Because I think that was a really good time for music fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. And there was a lot of different ways to access that, and people curated things. Nico, quickly, what do you think about how we protect artists in this new age?
I mean, that is sort of the missing middle, right? Like, we don't really talk enough about like, how are we supporting artists in this landscape where it's harder than ever to make an income from your music being available online. There's not a digital storefront the way there used to be. It is a lot of streaming, and streaming revenue harder than ever for artists to access. So like, how are we doing this in a way where we can bolster and uplift careers, but also make sure that everybody has access to music, that they can get, they can give themselves those contexts for, Charlie XCX or whomever. Like, these things are all really important. And we sort of like, whenever people talk about it, they always talk about like, oh, the labels need to be making more money or whatever. Like, no, we need to be bolstering artists' careers in order to be able to sort of lift up the system and ensure that it can keep going. Because otherwise, these things are going to start to dwindle and lose. And like, the 1% of artists that we always talk about are going to be the only ones that are really left. And that's kind of a sad musical landscape, right? Like, we need to make room for everybody. So how do we do it in an egalitarian way? And the best time that we had for that is when everybody, like you said, feral music stands stealing whatever they could. Like, that was kind of the best era for this.
Well, before we go, I want to point out that Raleigh's wearing his Edmonton Oilers jersey, and I want to play a little clip for you.
I be skating on your whole team, Connor McDavid, young player, but I'm in the league. Connor McDavid anticipated when I came in. We'll be winning when the game ends.
So that's Raleigh Pemberton. That's Cadence Weapon with an update to the Oilers anthem, Connor McDavid. They did lose Game 2 last night, but this song is about optimism, right, Raleigh? Why did you want to update this track for this historical moment that we're in right now?
No, it's a special moment. It's so special. I had to get the 2024 patch on my jersey.
Love it.
At the stadium yesterday. I really just want to do it for people in Edmonton. I know everyone's super excited. This is our team. It's a big deal to people back here. So I had to make a new version for the people.
You know what? I hope that it brings exactly what you want it to bring, which is a chance at the cup. I don't even watch hockey, but I get excited for, hometown heroes.
We'll take one win at least.
At least. Well, thank you both so much for being here. It was such a great conversation. Love revisiting our collective youth.
Oh, thanks so much for having us. What a great time.
This was awesome.
Raleigh Pemberton is a music critic and rapper known as Cadence Weapon. He's in Edmonton. Nico Stratus is a culture critic who writes the Substack Anxiety Shark from Toronto. And you can watch How Music Got Free Now on Paramount Plus. And make sure you do it after you listen to the rest of this podcast.
Despacito, quiero respirar tu cuello despacito. Deja que te diga cosas al oído para que te acuerdes si no estás conmigo. Despacito, quiero desnudarte a besos despacito. Firma las paredes.
I'm Emil Niazi sitting in for Elamine Abdel Mahmoud. This is Commotion. You remember this hot hit? I certainly do. That's Luis Fonsi's Despacito featuring Daddy Yankee. This was, the song of the summer for many, many summers in a row, one of the most streamed songs of all time, and certainly one of the most mainstream reggaeton tracks, which at this point is one of the primary drivers of pop music worldwide. But there's a legal case in the United States right now filed on behalf of Jamaican music production duo Steely and Clevie, and it's accusing more than 160 entities, people like Bad Bunny, Daddy Yankee, and other prominent reggaeton acts of copyright infringement. And this lawsuit could have huge ramifications for both reggaeton and the music industry. Ewan Simpson is an intellectual property lawyer and the chairman of the Jamaica Reggae Industry Association, and he's with me now from Kingston, Jamaica. Ewan, welcome to Commotion.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
So, we're really talking about this case for the very first time here on the show, and it's hard to sort of, get across how important it is for, the relationship between dancehall and reggaeton. So can you, we're going to go through the nuts and bolts of this lawsuit, which
Absolutely.
centers on this 1989 composition from Steely and Clevie. There's some dancing going on in the studio.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's hard to resist. So that composition is called The Fish Market Rhythm, and many music historians and reggaeton artists sort of consider this to be the soul compilation that kicked off this genre. It's how it was built. So talk to us about the central argument coming from Steely and Clevie's lawsuit.
The central argument is basically this. The Fish Market Rhythm was created in the 1980s, late 1980s, by Steely and Clevie. This rhythm inspired, but also provided the base, in many cases, of other works of copyright that all the defendants have benefited from in one way or another, whether they have sampled or they have copied in other ways. And so the central argument is, if you have copied, if you have benefited from a work of copyright or intellectual property, then the original creator of the work should also benefit. And it's actually a basic copyright principle.
So, we've heard about lawsuits where a hook or a sample sounds similar to something, but how common is it for a singular composition like this to be so important to the creation of a whole new genre?
It's not very common, and certainly not in the last 100 years. And so that is part of the anxiety that exists around this case, because of course, usually it is one song that influences another song, or a hook from a song that influences another song, or a line, lyrics, or a melodic phrase that influences some part of something else. Usually when people are sampling, they accept that they have sampled, it is easy to prove, and they move on. But this time, it is the building block of an entire genre that is being brought into question. And that is why there is anxiety. It doesn't happen very often, but it is explainable and it is discernible in the context of intellectual property.
So explain to us what they have to prove to win the lawsuit.
So the Steely and Clevie team will have to prove that the elements of the fish market rhythm that are identifiable in the songs, in the works of all these defendants, are sufficiently unique, are sufficiently distinct that they warrant protection, or that they warranted protection from the time the rhythm was made, and that those elements are in fact present and borrowed without permission.
So on the other side, you have people like Bad Bunny, Daddy Yankee. What do they have to prove in order to sort of, adequately defend themselves in this case?
They simply have to prove that the elements that they have used were not sufficiently distinctive, that they were not protected by copyright at the time that they were borrowed. So they will simply have to prove that, listen, this beat that we have turned into an entire genre called reggaeton was not sufficiently distinctive, and it was not something that was worthy of protection, which is a part of the argument that they are making, that a rhythm is not worthy of protection in the same way that other lawsuits have indicated that chords and chord progressions are not protected.
So as an IP lawyer yourself, how strong is this case?
It's a very strong case. It's a very strong case because it leans on some fundamental principles that have not been properly tested over time. And of course, with the advent of digital music, and you were having a conversation earlier about the digital revolution and how that changed things. But with the advent of digital music, and interestingly, this was one of the first digital rhythms out of Jamaica. So with this advent of digital music, what we are finding is that some of the lines are being blurred, and there are some principles that people are trying to throw out the window. So it is a good test for us to have a strong conversation about what we borrow, how much we borrow, and what that means for creativity and what it means for the benefit to the creator.
I mean, it sounds like we're having that conversation writ large across the arts industry in many ways.
Absolutely.
You've been following this lawsuit since it first started, but you also feel that there's a sort of a racial element embedded in all of this that's not necessarily being talked about as much. Can you sort of fill us in on that?
Absolutely. And I want to be clear that this is not necessarily something coming from the defendants, or even a point that is being made by the claimants. But in assessing the whole energy around the case and the commentary that you're seeing and the arguments, there is a kind of a feeling that these Jamaicans who are almost obscure in the global music business should kind of be happy that their music is being given some kind of highlight, and shouldn't worry about trying to earn from it. Now, the general principle of intellectual property knows no color. And so if intellectual property says, when you borrow, you must give credit, which is not in question, by the way. When you borrow, you must also give commensurate recompense to the creator. But in this context, everybody is saying, "Oh, Charlie, it's not worth it." And when you see what is written in the commentary, there's almost a kind of snide take on these obscure producers, or these nobodies, or they're making something out of nothing, which is almost diminishing the value of the creativity that has gone into this, diminishing the value of has been arrived. This is generally driven by a kind of colorist hue, which a lot of people do not want to take on, and we need to talk about it. We need to talk about the fact that you have developed versus developing, you have white versus black, or you have colored in different ways that are competing.
Well,
the
Ewan, I'm sorry, I
language around it.
have to cut you off there, but we'll
That's
be
fine, that's fine.
watching this case closely, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Not a problem at all.
Ewan Simpson is an intellectual property lawyer and the chair for the Jamaica Reggae Industry Association. He was here from Kingston, Jamaica. And that's it for Commotion. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can check us out on YouTube. I'm Emil Niazi sitting in for Elamine Abdel Mahmoud. Thanks for listening.